Master, I'm fine. I feel great now. Blue light flickered in Slowpoke's eyes, and its telepathic voice echoed directly in Aomuki's mind. Hearing Slowpoke's youthful tone, Aomuki couldn't help smiling. Slowpoke really did seem recovered. Not only did it no longer feel weak, its telepathy, which had been unreliable before, was much smoother. He reached out and stroked Slowpoke's pink head. Don't overdo it next time. Listen to me. Yadan. Slowpoke gave a contented cry as Aomuki stroked it. Then the blue light in its eyes pulsed again, and it sent the thought, Master, I'm fully recovered. I can use it one more time, and it won't be like this time. Aomuki's eyes brightened. That meant they could teleport again, and they'd be much closer to the base. Teleport only works to places it has visited before, so the nearest spot Slowpoke could target was the waterfall they'd seen earlier. The distance wasn't great, far shorter than the jump they'd just made. Aomuki trusted that with Slowpoke's recovery, a short teleport would be no problem. He nodded and smiled. All right, one more time, then we'll get dinner ready. He waved to Murkrow perched above, who'd been keeping watch in the trees. When Murkrow fluttered down, Aomuki told it, Murkrow, Slowpoke's recovered. Let's use teleport once more. Ghastly, come out too. Since Ghastly's scouting, it had been lingering in Aomuki's shadow, where the dark space felt comforting. Gengar. Ghastly drifted out slowly, circling Slowpoke a few times, clearly curious about Slowpoke's strange power. Yadan. Slowpoke replied telepathically, seeming to take a big brother attitude toward the new, childlike Ghastly. All right, Ghastly, don't bother Slowpoke. Slowpoke, start. Aomuki watched Ghastly play for a moment and allowed the brief interruption. Ghastly was newly joined and very childish. Regardless of how long it had lived, it was still immature by Ghastly standards. Ghost types were naturally playful. Training hadn't started yet, so Aomuki indulged it. Gengar. Ghastly obediently floated beside him, as if to say, See, I'm a good kid. With Ghastly settled, Slowpoke activated Teleport again. It was noticeably steadier, quicker to gather itself, and with finer control over its energy. When Aomuki opened his eyes, they were in another stretch of forest. Unlike the fast-moving pass through Scyther territory, where he hadn't memorized anything, he recognized this place clearly. This was where he and Murkrow had been chased by a Raticate horde, the event that led him to meet Slowpoke. Murkrow recognized it too. It landed and pointed at the broken patches of ground, cawing loudly. I know. That's where we set the trap when the Raticate chased us, Aomuki said with a smile, rubbing Murkrow's wing. Ghastly, intrigued, started peppering Murkrow with questions. As the team's oldest veteran, Murkrow happily recounted the chase and how the trap had maimed and killed many Raticate. With a grin, Aomuki watched Murkrow's storytelling enliven the group. Ghastly's arrival had made their little team much more animated. Murkrow had been Aomuki's first Pokémon and carried a lot of responsibility. Reliable, battle-hungry, quiet. Slowpoke, second to join, was shy but steady. With just those two, conversations had been brief. Ghastly, mischievous and inquisitive, had suddenly become the bridge between them, coaxing more talk out of everyone. Aomuki had been reluctant to interrupt the rare camaraderie, but the sun was nearly down. If they didn't build a fire now, moving around at night would be harder. All right, let's stop here for a bit. Murkrow, go catch some wild rabbits or pheasants. Ghastly, collect firewood. Slowpoke, use Psychic to pitch the tent. Aomuki broke in and assigned tasks. They all stopped chatting and obediently got to work. That night, they sat around the bonfire. Murkrow, freshly fed, lounged on the ground and didn't want to move. Slowpoke was the same, sated and sluggish. Only Ghastly remained energetic. As a ghost type, it didn't need to eat, though it could consume energy cubes. Aomuki hadn't made a special energy cube for Ghastly yet, so for tonight, it fed on the lingering death energy from the beasts Murkrow had caught. Watching Murkrow and Slowpoke eat heartily, Ghastly had once been curious about how solid food tasted. After one awkward attempt to put flesh into its mouth, only for it to fall through, Ghastly gave up politely. After a short rest, Aomuki said, Okay, we've rested enough. Let's let our food settle before bed. Murkrow and Slowpoke instinctively stood up, waiting for the training plan. Ghastly, not knowing the routine, copied them and fell silent too. Murkrow, 50 uses of Dark Pulse, 100 wing attacks. Aim at that tree. He nodded at a large tree they could both hug and set Murkrow's evening regimen. Slowpoke, keep training your Psychic. Today, lift 5 stones 500 times. With Slowpoke's psychic power having grown rapidly, Aomuki raised the bar considerably. And Ghastly. He paused, thinking. You'll start with shuttle runs. Use your speed to dash back and forth between 2 trees. Start with 2,000 repetitions. I want to test your stamina. Shamelessly asking for collections and recommendations. Chapter 62, Ghastly's Growth Direction, 2/3. This was Ghastly's first time in formal training, so Aoki couldn't be exact about how much it could handle. He made a rough estimate and sent Ghastly off to train on its own. Murkrow began by practicing Dark Pulse. The goal was to gather Dark-type energy and condense it into a single, focused strike to maximize damage. Next came Wing Attack. As Murkrow's strongest Flying-type move, part of its power came from surrounding the wings with Flying-type energy, and part from physical force. Stronger wing beats meant a harder-hitting wing attack. Slowpoke, as a Water Psychic type, technically had respectable water power, but its psychic talent far outshone it. Aoki had always emphasized developing Slowpoke's psychic abilities. If its psychic power was strong and was supplemented with water moves, Slowpoke could act as mobile artillery, controlling the field, dishing out damage, and still having decent bulk and HP. Ghastly, a Ghost Poison type, boasted a high special attack base stat. But the plan for Ghastly, especially considering its eventual evolution into Gengar, wasn't to win by quick, decisive strikes. It was a fighter meant for attrition. With Ghost-type trickiness and Poison's lingering damage, prolonging a battle would steadily wear opponents down. The main prerequisite was simply surviving the opponent's early onslaught. Ghastly's high special attack and speed were excellent, but its HP was very low. A bad matchup could KO it instantly. So survival first, damage second. The faster and more evasive it was, the longer it could stay in the fight and the more damage it could inflict. Add to that Ghastly's aptitude for control and annoying status moves, and its tricky potential skyrocketed. Aoki's ideal moveset for Ghastly was simple but potent. Hypnosis, Dream Eater, Rest, Sleep Talk, plus the poison move Toxic. If it could chain those moves flawlessly, Ghastly's strategy would be complete, capable even of wearing down and defeating higher-level foes. In Aoki's team, Ghastly would be the main damage dealer. Murkrow wasn't built for long battles, and Slowpoke was too slow and easy to target. With future evolution and the right Megastone, confronting even tougher opponents could become feasible. When Aoki returned to the Team Rocket base, it was already a full day later. The walk from Raticate's territory to the base had taken a day, but not all of that time was travel. The majority had been spent training and leveling up the Pokémon. Ghastly, which had started the day at the lowest level, improved the most. Fighting alongside Murkrow and Slowpoke and taking on foes above its level, Ghastly shot up from level 10 to level 14 in a single day. The constant battles and Murkrow and Slowpoke's influence turned the naturally spirited Ghastly into a full-blown battle maniac, eager to take on everything it met. That single-mindedness explained its 4-level jump. Slowpoke and Murkrow each gained a level 2, reaching level 22 and level 20 respectively. Part of the reason was Ghastly's tendency to stir up trouble. It would taunt stronger Pokémon, and, when things went badly, it would drag Murkrow and Slowpoke in for revenge, forcing them into extra fights and, consequently, more experience. After a day of continuous battles, they returned to the base. Slowpoke, you shouldn't be out here. Go back to your Pokeball and get some rest, Aoki said, withdrawing Slowpoke's Ultra Ball. As a shiny Pokémon, Slowpoke's pink coloration made it conspicuous. Anyone with a sharp eye could notice it instantly. To avoid drawing unwanted attention, Aoki recalled him. His main concern wasn't the trial participants, so much as some of Team Rocket's members on the island, those who'd seen plenty of conflict and might be willing to take risks for a valuable catch. Big names like Viper and Shadow might not care, but some ambitious lieutenants could be dangerous. Aoki handed the incubator holding the Larvitar egg to Ghastly and instructed it to hide the incubator in his shadow. Only then did Aoki, with Murkrow at his side, walk openly into the Team Rocket base. The corridor was the same long, narrow passage, but this time Aoki didn't feel that heavy oppression pressing on him. Strength changes perspective. Now that he had 2 green aptitude Pokémon around level 20, a level 14 Ghastly with excellent potential, and treasures like Earth's core milk and a dusk stone, he no longer saw himself as just another trial participant. The pressure from Team Rocket felt much lighter. He stepped out into the base plaza with a completely different frame of mind than the one he'd had on his first visit. Where it had once felt desolate, the plaza was now bustling. People and Pokémon hurried about in all directions. Not just trial participants, but even some Team Rocket grunts were moving briskly. The informants who usually lingered in the plaza had disappeared. Aoki noticed at least 3 or 4 less of them. "Interesting, the base is busier than before," he murmured, a smile tugging at his lips. It didn't take long for news of his return to spread. A group of people emerged from the dormitory area and came straight toward the plaza. Each had at least one Pokémon at their side. The leader had 2. Their faces showed a mix of emotions, nervousness, excitement, fear, but they walked quickly, as if afraid of missing something. When the leader reached the plaza and saw Aoki standing there, he hurried the last few steps. The others followed close behind, their expressions growing more intense. "Lord Aoki, you've returned." The man at the front was Sky, the trial participant Aoki had spared in the wild, and the one to whom he'd given the coughing that once belonged to Solos. "Here, I'd like to collectively thank all the readers who voted for me and added me to their collections. And also to those brothers and sisters who tipped Jinmu, I kneel and thank you here. Thank you, my masters." Chapter 63, Rewards and Punishments, 3 Thurs. Sky stood before Aoki, flanked by his Arbok and a coughing that had once belonged to Soros and now trembled with fear. He moved quickly to Aoki's side, dropped to one knee, and the 20 or so people behind him followed suit, dropping down and shouting in unison, "Lord Aoki!" The unified cry rolled across the plaza, turning heads among the passers-by. When they saw Aoki standing and Sky kneeling before him, many put the pieces together at once. Aoki's eyes narrowed as he took in Sky and the crowd at his back. He recognized a few faces, former solo trainers who were competent in their own right. A scan from his chip had already read the Pokémon data of everyone gathered. Their average level was about 17, with generally decent aptitudes. 2 trainers had only orange-level aptitudes, but their Pokémon were relatively high-leveled. Aoki inclined his head minutely. Gathering such a force in only a few days was no small feat. More impressive still was the coughing at Sky's side. It was not only subdued, but showed signs of having grown stronger. "Rise," Aoki said softly. Sky stood, bowed, and took a position slightly lower than Aoki. The Arbok slithered close, and the coughing kept its gaze averted from Aoki and his Murkrow, its fear obvious. The others rose as well, heads bowed, hardly daring to breathe. A few of the more nervous ones wiped their foreheads and relaxed a bit when they saw no anger in Aoki's face. "You did very well, Sky," Aoki said with a small smile. Sky's answer was halting. "It's what a subordinate should do. And this coughing," he paused, debating how much to say. He had used some questionable methods to assemble the group. Some of these people had gathered under Soros and were now under Sky's control. Others were independent trainers who had been persuaded by Aoki's reputation to join willingly. But the most uneasy among them were those Sky had coerced or enticed into the fold, using tales of Aoki's ruthlessness and Soros's captured coughing as proof. The coughing had become tangible evidence, Sky's prize, and the reason many now treated him as one of Aoki's closest allies. He wasn't sure how Aoki would react to that part of the story. Aoki watched him for a long moment, his gaze steady enough to make Sky sweat. Then he looked away. "I said you did well," he replied. "I judge results, not processes." His tone hardened faintly, enough to be a warning in case Sky began to confuse ends and means in future decisions. Sky bowed lower, nodding repeatedly, unable to wipe the damp from his brow. The others stood motionless, having felt that brief flash of cold intent in Aoki's presence and straightening their minds accordingly. Aoki was satisfied. He didn't need to know every detail of how Sky had pulled the group together. The result mattered. These people were, for now, pawns he'd willingly let Sky manage. But since Sky had effectively formed a faction, some formal recognition was necessary. "If you do well, there will be rewards," Aoki said. "Give me your ID card later, and I'll transfer 1,000 points to you." 1,000 points. The number stunned the group. Many could only dream of such a sum, and some had less than 100 points on their own cards. And Fox, Aoki continued, you did well too. 200 points for you. Rewards and penalties. Aoki managed his followers with both. Fox, respectful and surprised, could hardly contain his delight. He'd only ever collected around 100 points from missions before this. The rest of the group watched with a mixture of envy and determination. Sky's 1,000 points made them green with jealousy, but Fox's sudden 200 was the raw sting, someone who joined only a short while earlier, getting more than some of them had ever earned. As long as you perform, Aoki said, meeting their eyes, there will be rewards. Points, Pokemon, items, you'll be able to choose what you want. The eyes of the 20-odd people shone. Loyalty and ambition mingled on their faces as they imagined the rewards they might win by proving themselves. Chapter 64. Guja asking for trouble, Thur. Points were a given, the common currency within Team Rocket, far more useful than League money. Pokemon mattered too. Skylar had only become the current manager because Aoki had rewarded him with a coughing. Everyone believed that with a prize like that, they too could rise to Skylar's position. Items made up a wide category, from ordinary berries and potions to rare skills and exotic treasures. And since Skylar had already received 1,000 points, no one doubted Aoki's promises. He had, in effect, built himself a small faction on Trial Island, a large one among the contestants. That was Team Rocket for you. Under Sakaki, factions proliferated. Big factions contained smaller ones. They competed, vied for advantage, and through that rivalry, Sakaki had turned a third-rate gang into an organization capable of challenging the League. As long as the balance among those factions held, the whole machine ran smoothly. Sakaki's confidence and charisma kept everyone competing inwardly instead of rebelling outwardly. His own strength and the fearsome trump card called Shadow helped as well. With warnings, rewards, and inducements, Aoki had managed to bring his group into line. Provided his personal power was enough, he could solve any minor trouble. Let's move. Prepare yourselves and wait for the test to start. Aoki said, Yes, Lord Aoki. We've got our own meeting place now. The brothers at the dorm built a big hall for us, Skylar answered, bowing. Aoki brightened. Skylar's efficiency was useful. With Aoki leading and Skylar organizing, the group headed toward the dormitory area. By the way, what's with all those people in the plaza? Aoki asked as they walked. A space that had been empty before was now crowded with trial participants and rocket grunts. That's because, Skylar began, but his explanation was cut off. The rules for the test have changed. Skylar stopped mid-sentence, flushed with a half-formed retort, when the newcomer stepped forward. Gugya, in a white rocket uniform with short brownish-blonde hair and a hard look in his eyes, strode up with his own followers. He stopped in front of Aoki and announced, The attack test is only one part now. If someone ranked lower thinks they're stronger, they can challenge someone above them. Win, and you take their place. Lose, and you drop 10 ranks. Life or death don't matter. When he said, life or death don't matter, the murderous intent in his gaze swelled. Aoki was his rival, and he wasn't hiding that he wanted to destroy him. Aoki laughed softly, unperturbed. Without his recent lucky breaks, Gugya would be nothing to him. So you want to pick a fight with me right away? Gugya's posture radiated aggression. Skylar and the others tensed, expecting a fight. Aoki's remark was only a tease. He understood Gugya. Loud, intensely competitive, but not a fool. Raising a challenge here would likely turn into a brawl with unpredictable results, and many people could change the outcome. Gugya sniffed. What frustrated him most was Aoki's easygoing attitude, the way the other man seemed indifferent every time he charged in full force. Don't act like you've already got first place locked up. If you want me to challenge you, you better be holding first. Maybe then it'll be me challenging you. Aoki's smile widened. Oh? I'll be looking forward to it. A fresh flare of anger swept Gugya. Every time he came at Aoki full force, Aoki's casual calm felt like punching air, humiliating. He stood his ground, face alternating between red and green, fists tightening with an audible clench. The Arbok at his side was coiled, narrow, cold eyes fixed on Aoki, waiting for a command. Aoki inclined his head. Excuse me, please move aside. The blunt request broke Gugya's momentum. He opened his mouth to retort but couldn't find the words. Beside Aoki, Honchkrow observed Arbok warily, ready to strike down any sudden attack. Honchkrow was confident it could react faster and intercept if Arbok lunged. Gugia snorted in frustration and turned away with his Arbok and trailing subordinates. Each man walked with his head down. The usually arrogant Gugia had once again been humiliated by Aoki's indifference. They were reluctant to speak up now, not wanting to become Aoki's next target. These followers still hoped Gugia's family connections would get them a better start in Team Rocket after Trial Island, but what they didn't know was that Gugia had no intention of relying on his brother. He wanted to prove himself and planned to rely on his own strength, no favors. Aoki watched Gugia go and chuckled to himself. He didn't dislike Gugia. Brash and domineering though he was at least honest in his way. A true villain, Aoki thought, was preferable to a hypocrite. That said, if Gugia insisted on being an enemy, Aoki would show no mercy. The walk from the plaza to the dormitory was over a kilometer, but to the 20-some new recruits, it felt like a whole day. The pressure of walking with the top-ranked Aoki weighed on them. When they nearly collided with Gugia in the middle of the road and feared a fight might break out, they seriously considered whether to intervene. Fortunately, the clash was a false alarm. When they reached the hall Skylar had mentioned, Aoki was a little surprised. Built entirely of wood and crude from the outside, it nevertheless exceeded his expectations with its size. Chapter 65, Completing the Mission, 23. The hall inside was vast. A raised platform dominated the center, and on it sat a single imposing chair. Aoki didn't bother with formalities. He walked straight up and sat, while Darkrai floated to perch on the chair's back, looking down at the gathered crowd. Seeing everyone lined up below, Aoki felt a small, surprising thrill. No wonder people liked power. The view from above was intoxicating. Even in his previous life, he had never looked down on subordinates like this. This was his first time experiencing it. Sky stood at the front of the group, stepped forward, and reported, "Lord Aoki, we have 25 members right now, 26 including you. Our average rank is around the 40th, with a few members in the teens or 20s. We're one of the stronger teams in this base." Aoki nodded, prompting her to continue. "With your first place ranking, no one has dared to touch us. Even though it's only been 2 days, we've earned a total of 237 points so far. They're on my ID card." On the trial island, there was an unwritten rule. Joining a faction gave you protection, but you had to hand over 20% of the points you earned as a protection fee. Sky added, "Keep those points with you for now. If anyone makes a contribution, you can reward them directly." Aoki wasn't bothered by such a small sum. He had just handed out 1,000 points without thinking. For a band of trial participants, those points were useful, but off the island, they would amount to nothing more than a small squad within Team Rocket, a drop in the ocean. Still, survivors of the trials had more potential than ordinary Rocket recruits. The group he was casually forming would be enough to pick up a few decent subordinates once he had established himself. After listening a while longer, Aoki dismissed them. He had never been one to enjoy parading about with a posse. Both in his old life and this one, he preferred solitude. He relaxed most around his Pokémon and liked to be a hands-off leader, leaving daily management to capable people like Sky. Her talent and administrative skill surprised him. If she proved loyal, she might be his first real subordinate within Team Rocket. "I hope you don't disappoint me, Sky," he murmured as he left the hall with Darkrai. Because Viper had changed the test rules, the next trial was scheduled for the afternoon. Many training routines couldn't be practiced openly at the base, and besides, Slowpoke was better kept inside its Pokeball, while Ghastly, Aoki's hidden trump, was not something to reveal yet. Before the test began, he wanted to go to the exchange office and submit the mission Shade had assigned. The exchange office was busier than the last time he'd been there. Trial participants had started to adapt to the island, learning how to earn and trade points for items. Most left with only a few dozen points after a mission. The high-value tasks were either too difficult or snapped up immediately. Everyone was busy trying to squeeze a little more strength out of themselves in the time before the test. No one paid Aoki any mind when he entered. Only one attendant noticed him and beckoned him over from behind the counter. The attendant smiled as Aoki approached. "I didn't expect you back so soon. The Lord instructed that if you came, you should be sent straight to him. Aoki was quietly surprised by Shade's arrangements. Shade was a vice captain of the Shadow Group and a champion-level expert, yet he'd made a special arrangement for this low-ranking trial participant. The attendant led him to a hidden door in a corner and opened it. A dim corridor led to a familiar room. The first time Aoki had come here, he had been jittery and anxious. This time he felt calm. From his 2 interactions with Shade, it was clear. As long as he had value, Shade would not act against him. Shade had even given him the Shadow Reserve member medal. This time, Shade wasn't shrouded in a mysterious black robe. He sat at his desk reading a book. Aoki finally saw his true appearance. Light brown hair, pale skin, likely from too little sun, and sharply defined features that hinted at both Western and Eastern traits. One hand had only 2 fingers remaining, the other was intact, with long, elegant fingers almost like a woman's. He wore simple black clothes and carried an energetic, capable air. Shade looked up and smiled. "You're here." Aoki approached the desk, took out the Gengar Pokeball he'd been asked to bring, and set it respectfully on the surface. Shade's expression shifted as he picked it up. Through the transparent window on the ball, Aoki could see the Gengar inside. It had been lying lazily, but it immediately sat up at the sight of Shade, its face full of longing. "You've been through a lot, Gengar," Shade said softly, then clipped the Pokeball to his waist. He looked at Aoki and nodded. "You did very well. Go find the person who brought you in and exchange for 10,000 points later." 10,000 points were insignificant to someone at Shade's level, and even to Aoki, they were a considerable reward. "Yes," Aoki replied. Shade's interest seemed piqued despite Aoki's silence. He smiled and asked, "Aren't you curious why I put Gengar there?" Chapter 66, Choice 33. Aoki hadn't expected Ying to ask that question. In his experience, Ying was always efficient and avoided small talk. Has he changed today? Aoki wondered silently. He kept his face calm, nodded, and answered honestly, "Curious, but if you won't say, I won't pry." Aoki had always shown Ying deference, not because Ying was a high-ranking Team Rocket cadre or the deputy leader of the Shadow Group, but because Ying was an Elite 4-level powerhouse. The strong command respect, Aoki believed. Strength determined influence. As someone who truly matched that level, Ying earned Aoki's utmost respect. Ying stared for a moment, then laughed. "Haha, you're really something." Ying had called him good so many times since they first met that Aoki still wasn't sure what Ying meant by it. The first time, he thought he understood. The second, he thought about it and understood. But by the third and fourth, he realized the praise carried more layers than he'd expected. Ying's smile faded, and he added, "In a battle, he was gravely injured, protecting me. I knew of a place on Trial Island that could heal him quickly, the ghastly gathering place you visited." His eyes softened, as if remembering. "I found it the first time I came to Trial Island. Oh, and I was one of the first group of trial participants from Team Rocket." Aoki blinked. "The first batch of trial participants? Ying came from Trial Island too?" Ying must have seen the question in his face, because he continued, "Exactly as you think. When the island was first discovered, only 2 of us from that first group survived. I'm one of them. You may meet the other someday." He didn't name the other survivor, but Aoki guessed it might be the other Shadow Deputy leader, Anne. Ying steered the conversation back to the present. "But that's beside the point. About the ghastly place. You saw that stone pillar emitting ghost energy, right?" He warned him, "The water there is deep. It's not a place for you to meddle right now. Luckily you didn't push it, otherwise you might not be here today. Few people even know about that spot, so keep quiet. When your strength is ready, you'll find out naturally." Aoki's eyes narrowed briefly, then returned to their neutral expression. He nodded. He had no intention of probing the pillar now. If even Ying hadn't destroyed it, there must be a reason to preserve it. Ying saw the fleeting curiosity in Aoki's face, but didn't press. "You've passed my first test," he said. "You're entitled to know who I am within Team Rocket." Aoki felt his heart stir. He had long suspected Ying's identity, but couldn't reveal that he knew. Within Team Rocket, only those strong enough were allowed to learn about Shadow's existence. Ying pointed at him. "Take out the medal I gave you last time." Aoki produced the jet-black, cloud-shaped metal from his Team Rocket belt and handed it over. Ying turned it over, tracing the carved patterns. This metal represents the most secret department in Team Rocket, the Provisional Shadow Membership Medal. From the moment you accept it, Shadow's test begins. The tasks you helped me with earlier were the first stage. He went on without pause. My name is Ying, as you know. I'm the deputy leader of the Shadow Group. If you can pass the series of tasks I give you, you can join us. I can't tell you now what benefits or responsibilities come with membership, but many in Team Rocket long for it. Some aren't even aware Shadow exists. He gave Aoki a choice. You can keep taking my tasks until you qualify, or you can give them up and stay on Trial Island, working your way up through Team Rocket, grunt, squad leader, step by step. Aoki had already made up his mind. Joining Shadow didn't conflict with his ambition to rise in Team Rocket. If anything, Shadow would make the climb easier. But to keep his thoughts guarded, he pretended to ponder for a moment before answering. I'll continue the tasks. Ying smiled. You'll be glad you made this choice someday. Aoki nodded without replying. Some truths couldn't be said aloud, but he knew he had chosen correctly. At that moment, a buzzing grew from the corner of the room into a full, familiar sound. A beedrill drifted out and landed on Ying's shoulder, its twin stingers gently rubbing against his arm. Aoki's surprise shifted to recognition. That's, Ying smiled. Yes, that hatched from the egg I gave you last time. Aoki relaxed, but then confusion creased his brow. Even for fast-growing bug types, evolving from hatchling to beedrill in just a week was astonishing. Ying noticed and explained, this one has excellent potential and trains hard every day. It evolved into a beedrill today. Please recommend and favorite. This is Jinmu's first time writing a novel. If there are shortcomings, please forgive me. Thank you for your support. Chapter 67, The Possibility of Temporarily Leaving the Island, 13. Pokemon Beedrill, Dark Green. Gender Female, Level 11. Type Bug Poison. Ability Sniper. Held Item, Neg Moves, Bug Bite, Focus Energy. Basic Moves, Twineedle, Fury Attack, Tutor Moves, Sharpen. HM, Protect, Toxic, Hidden Power, Fire. When Aoki saw the data for this Beedrill, he was genuinely shocked, not just by how quickly it had grown, but by its aptitude. The Beedrill, which should have been Green Aptitude, had reached Dark Green, only one step from Cyan. Shadow truly lived up to his reputation as an Elite 4-level trainer and a leader inside Team Rocket. He had the resources to force a Pokemon's aptitude up a stage. That single-stage jump might seem small, but if it continued to grow, the Beedrill's combat potential would increase considerably. With Shadow's intensive training and the many skills poured into it, even a Cyan aptitude Pokemon might struggle against it. What surprised Aoki even more was the Beedrill's ability. Most Beedrill have Swarm, which boosts Bug-type moves when HP is low, a decent trait. But this one had the hidden ability Sniper, which greatly amplifies damage from critical hits. Normally, a critical multiplies damage by 1.5. With Sniper, it multiplies by 2.25. That extra 0.75 multiplier can turn a critical into a one-shot. Sniper is an extremely dangerous ability. If Aoki had known the Beedrill had Sniper from the start, he might have tried to keep it himself, but the chance of a hidden ability appearing is very small. Shadow had been incredibly lucky to hatch a Beedrill with Sniper, and that may be exactly why he invested resources to raise its aptitude. After the initial surprise, Aoki composed himself. Although this Beedrill was exceptional, he had no regrets. Shadow watched his expression carefully and noted that beyond the shock, there were no needless emotions. He nodded to himself. This trial is special, Shadow said, so don't hide your strength anymore. Show what you can do. I can't explain exactly how it's special yet, but I can tell you this, reveal your talent. Don't worry about people with ill intent targeting you. Shadow's voice took on a serious tone, the invisible authority of an Elite 4 trainer settling over the room. Team Rocket, as a dark organization, had long suppressed talented people. Shadow knew what Aoki feared, but this trial was different. Hearing those words, Aoki's eyes widened. Special? Why hadn't he sensed that in his previous life? Didn't you notice? Shadow continued. The participants in this batch generally have good aptitudes. More importantly, many of the Pokemon given to the participants have high aptitudes. Do you think everyone has a helpful brother like Gujia? At that, Aoki's pupils shrank. Only then did he realize the implication. These trial participants were supposed to be expendable cannon fodder. Why would they be given green aptitude Pokemon? If a participant died, the cost would be too high. Why hadn't he realized before? Perhaps his own poor past performance had kept him from noticing. I know your Murkrow has good aptitude, Shadow went on. It even held back during the last test. There's nothing wrong with being cautious, but if you want to climb in Team Rocket later on, this trial is a rare opportunity. This time, it's different. Shadow emphasized the last words without elaborating. The meaning hung in the air. Aoki's expression grew grave. If Shadow, the man who controlled so much, said this trial was special, it likely was. He wasn't naive enough to think that simply doing well would guarantee him a high position in Team Rocket, but not holding back could open doors. It would be dangerous, nothing more than walking a razor's edge without disguise, but it might be worth the risk. Then Shadow said something that nearly made Aoki jump. The little fellow in your shadow is a talented Pokemon too. You've got some luck. He gave a meaningful look at the shadow behind Aoki. Cold sweat broke out over Aoki's skin. He instinctively reached for his Team Rocket belt. There was nothing wrong with the Pokemon in the shadow, but there was more than one there. Facing Shadow might make resistance pointless, but Aoki still braced himself. Seeing Aoki's wary reaction, Shadow smiled and waved a hand. Don't worry, I wouldn't bully someone like you. Your Pokemon belong to you. I won't take them. If I wanted to deal with you, why would I be chatting for so long? Besides, even if you send another Pokemon out now, would it help? That was the confidence of an Elite 4-level trainer. Shadow didn't truly fear that Aoki could slip away. He took Aoki's alarm as the understandable paranoia of someone in Team Rocket. Aoki relaxed slightly, admitting to himself that his reaction had been exaggerated. Still, one thing was true. With his current strength, even sending out all 3 of his Pokemon wouldn't be enough to withstand a single move from Shadow. Even the Gengar he had retrieved earlier was beyond what Murkrow and the others could handle. As Aoki's tension eased, Shadow waved and let the Beedrill go play. He propped his elbows on the table and leaned forward again. In short, do well in this test. If you meet my expectations, I can arrange for you to leave the trial island temporarily. After all, there aren't any more opponents for you here. Shadow's words struck Aoki like thunder. If he could leave the island early, the benefits would be enormous. He looked at Shadow, who appeared unusually earnest, and struggled inwardly with the temptation. After a brief fight with himself, he couldn't resist. Yes, I understand, Lord Shadow, he said. Shadow slowly leaned back, a smile playing on his face. Of course, the prerequisite is that you satisfy me. Please collect. Thank you all for your donations. Jinmu is typing on a phone, so it's not very convenient. When I get back tonight, I will thank each of you individually. Thank you so much for your support. Please keep collecting and recommending. When Aomuki stepped out of the dim study, he noticed his back was a little sweaty. He was surprised. Shadow had guessed he could see the Ghastly in his shadow, but it wasn't impossible. He'd been careless. Fortunately, even if he'd overreacted, Shadow would only think Aomuki was afraid of having his Pokemon stolen. He patted his stiff cheeks, breathed deeply, and forced his scattered thoughts back into order. It wasn't easy. When one thing monopolized your mind, the only way out was to think of something else. Murkrow's current moves were enough for everyday use for the moment, but Slowpoke and Ghastly still hadn't learned any TM moves. Aomuki planned to upgrade them this trip. 2 Protects were essential. Those alone would wipe out the 10,000 points he'd just earned from the mission. But they were necessary, and he didn't begrudge the cost. As Ghastly's closest guardian, Protect would let it block crucial attacks in battle and serve to protect Aomuki himself. Slowpoke, too, needed Protect. Whether in battle or as a buffer before teleporting away, using Protect first to soak up a big hit was very practical. Beyond those 2 safety purchases, Aomuki ran simulations of future battles for Ghastly and Slowpoke. Ghastly's core strategy would be Hypnosis, Rest, Sleep Talk, Toxic. Rest was already learned, so he only needed Sleep Talk and Toxic to complete the set. He didn't have enough points to buy both, though. They were valuable and expensive. If he had to choose, Aomuki leaned towards Sleep Talk. Ghastly's poison typing wasn't yet fully developed, so toxic wouldn't be immediately effective. He planned to cultivate Ghastly's poison attribute later and combine it with poison-type moves, so Sleep Talk made more sense now. Sleep Talk would cost another 7,000 points. For Slowpoke, Aomuki wanted Hidden Power. As a water psychic type, Slowpoke could handle many matchups but was vulnerable to a broad range: bug, ghost, grass, electric, and dark, 5 different types. If Hidden Power turned out to the right type, it could cover some of those weaknesses. Hidden Power's type depended entirely on the Pokémon itself, a matter of luck, and though common, its demand kept the exchange price high, 7,000 points. He did the math silently. He'd had 7,400 points after his first exchange, and after rewarding Sky and Fox, he had 6,200. Adding the 10,000 mission reward brought him to 16,200, still far short of the 24,000 needed for 2 Protects plus Sleep Talk and Hidden Power. The only option was to convert something else into points. Aomuki had already worked this out before he left the secret room. He walked over to the familiar exchange clerk, pulled out his points card, and said, "There were 6,200 points left on this, plus the 10,000 from the mission, so that should make 16,200. The clerk took the card and waited. He'd already prepared the 10,000 points Shadow wanted to give Aomuki. He had his guesses about what Aomuki would do after the mission, but as a low-level employee, it was better not to know too much. He preferred to keep his head down and do his job. Aomuki hesitated, then took a palm-sized matte black stone from his Team Rocket belt, a basic dusk stone, and set it on the counter. He'd chosen to convert a basic dusk stone into points. The intermediate dusk stone and the Earth's core milk were priceless, not worth converting at Team Rocket's acquisition rate. A basic dusk stone, while valuable, was relatively common and could be bought with money. Selling it for points was the most efficient choice. According to the exchange list, a basic dusk stone was priced at 50,000 points, but if converted into points, it was discounted by 30%, so he'd receive 35,000 points. Aomuki privately grumbled about Team Rocket's exchange system. From that margin alone, it was clear how much profit they made. "Exchange this dusk stone for points, please," he said. The clerk took the stone and, despite being used to Aomuki's uncanny luck, was still a little stunned. Aomuki seemed to leave nothing for the other trial participants. Even Gujia, with strength and connections, barely had a few thousand points without borrowing from his brother. Yet look at Aomuki. Between the 20,000 he'd had earlier, the 10,000 from Shadow's mission, and now this dusk stone, his resources were staggering. The clerk's smile stiffened as he nodded and entered the transaction. "This is a basic dusk stone. Converted, it yields 35,000 points," he said. "Please collect, please collect. La la la." Chapter 69, Awakening Power, 3/3. Aoki already had a rough idea of the exchange price. "Give me 2 Protect TMs, 1 Sleep Talk TM, and 1 Hidden Power. No, make that 3 Hidden Power TMs. He changed his mind at the last second. Since he had enough points, why not get Hidden Power for all 3 Pokemon? Even if the Awakened type wasn't useful, it didn't matter. But what if it was? What if the Awakened type perfectly covered a Pokemon's weakness? That would be down to luck. The staffer handling the exchange tried to hide his surprise, but Aoki's casual spending still made his eye twitch. "This is your ID card. You still have 13,200 points, and these are the TMs you exchanged for." He pulled the TMs out of the safe, handed them to Aoki, swiped the point card, and went back to his other work. He'd been with Team Rocket for 2 years. Though a civilian, he still worked for them. He didn't want to keep staring and risking envy. Aoki glanced at him, didn't think much of it, put the TMs in his storage belt, and walked toward the specialized training rooms with Murkrow. There were TM machines in the exchange office, but Aoki didn't want to expose everything he owned. This was his first time using a training room. The rooms were Team Rocket's own, partitioned and equipped with TM machines, training tools, and a few wooden dummies. Most were empty. The usage rate was low. Under the staff member's odd look, Aoki paid 100 points and chose the largest room. "Ghastly, check for surveillance cameras," he said after locking the door. Ghastly slipped out of the shadows around Aoki and scouted the room, sliding along the walls and ceiling. After a thorough sweep, it reported back that no surveillance devices had been found. Satisfied, Aoki released Slowpoke as well. Slowpoke had been cooped up in its Pokeball for a long time and yawned repeatedly on coming out. The normally slow but content creature had found the confinement stifling. "Hang in there a little longer. We'll be done soon," Aoki murmured, stroking Slowpoke's round head. Slowpoke shook its head sleepily and made its comfortable little sound. Murkrow flew down at once to chat and play with Slowpoke. Both had been under high-pressure training, so this relaxed moment was rare. After a short play session, Aoki interrupted them. "Come over here and learn these moves." He shook the TMs in his hand, then put each Pokemon back into its Pokeball and placed them on the TM machine to teach them the new moves. TMs could teach moves, but they couldn't make a Pokemon proficient with them instantly. After learning, the moves required practice to be used well. Protect and Sleep Talk didn't worry him. Protect, once learned, could be used immediately and had to be mastered through real combat. Sleep Talk was specifically for Ghastly and could be trained in use later. Aoki was most curious about what type each Pokemon's hidden power would awaken into. Murkrow went first. As the team's lead, it set an example. It closed its eyes and activated hidden power, following the imprint the TM had left in its mind. Since it had just learned it, it took a long time, nearly 3 minutes, before the move finally manifested. Tiny electric filaments crackled around Murkrow, gathering into a yellow energy sphere threaded with faint blue currents. As the energy compacted, the ball's color shifted. What had begun as yellow took on a pale blue sheen. Murkrow lost control as more currents ran across the surface. It hurled the energy ball at the target in the center of the room. The sphere struck the bullseye and detonated in a small explosion with a loud bang. Yellow and blue currents shot outward from the blast, dissipating before they reached the edges of the room. Hidden power, Aoki thought, basically gathered an awakened-type energy into a projectile and hurled it. It could damage a single target or affect an area within the explosion. Team Rocket had done a thorough job renovating this room. Apart from a black scorch mark on the floor, the blast left little damage, and the staff weren't alerted, a testament to the room's soundproofing. Aoki thought facilities like this were priceless. From the color and the effects, Murkrow's hidden power had clearly become electric type. It resembled the move Electro Ball, though the energy wasn't as condensed and it didn't scale with speed differences the way Electro Ball did. Still, Aoki was pleased. Electric hidden power didn't change Murkrow's weaknesses, but it broadened its offensive coverage. No longer would Murkrow be completely helpless against water types. In water or water-themed arenas, Murkrow might not be easily defeated, yet could struggle to win. Having an electric move would help significantly. Against other flying types, the electric hidden power could also give Murkrow better counters, letting it dominate the skies more decisively. A good start, Aoki thought, smiling as he stroked Murkrow's feathers in reward. Please bookmark. Please recommend. Why do others get big featured chapter recommendations? I want that too. Jingmu is still working overtime and is tired. Chapter 70, Sleep Talk, 13. After testing Murkrow's hidden power type, it was Slowpoke's turn, the second brother on the team. Like Murkrow, Slowpoke was using hidden power for the first time and took about 3 minutes before it could activate the move successfully. Unlike Murkrow's yellow, lightning-filled orb, Slowpoke's energy ball was red and radiated scorching heat. Aomu recognized immediately that Slowpoke's hidden power was fire type. Compared with Murkrow's electric hidden power, Slowpoke's fire hidden power was excellent. It not only broadened Slowpoke's offensive coverage, but also helped compensate for some of its type weaknesses. As a water psychic type, Slowpoke was doubly vulnerable to bug, ghost, grass, electric, and dark moves. With fire hidden power, it was no longer so helpless against bug and grass types. While the fire move didn't erase those weaknesses entirely, it at least gave Slowpoke a viable offensive option against bug and grass type opponents, so it wouldn't be reduced to only taking hits. Fire hidden power also helped against steel and ice types, which improved the team's overall coverage. Naturally, Aomu resolved not to send Slowpoke directly against electric or dark opponents unless absolutely necessary, those types were still too dangerous for it. Ghastly's hidden power surprised Aomu by coming out grass type. Hidden power's type can be unrelated to a Pokemon's natural typing, but Aomu had not expected a grass awakening for Ghastly. Grass is one of the types with many counters, but it also has useful matchups. Although Ghastly was an insubstantial ghost, supposedly doubly weak to ground moves, having a grass hidden power would at least give it a fighting chance against ground types in the future. Paired with Ghastly's hypnosis and other control and stall options, the grass hidden power increased its offensive reach as well. Overall, Aomu was pleased with the results. Murkrow, Slowpoke, and Ghastly now each had different hidden power types, and Slowpoke and Ghastly had gained moves that compensated for some of their weaknesses. The team's offensive coverage had improved significantly, letting Aomu plan more effective strategies against opponents not obviously weak to his team's original types. With hidden power testing finished, Aomu decided not to waste the rented training hall. It was a safe environment where they could train without worrying about revealing too much of their strength. He assigned Murkrow and Slowpoke to practice their newly awakened hidden power moves, while giving Ghastly targeted training of a different kind. Ghastly had only recently been caught. Aside from the stamina tests during earlier training and a few low-level battles on the way back, Aomu didn't know it as well as the others, but he understood the kind of training Ghastly would benefit from. The immediate priority wasn't practicing its new hidden power, but improving the TM learned move Sleep Talk. Sleep Talk randomly uses one of the user's known moves while the user is asleep. In his previous life, Aomu had seen a formidable Gengar that could seemingly choose which move to use with Sleep Talk while asleep. He didn't know how that Gengar had been trained, but the example made him suspect Sleep Talk's selections could be guided. So Ghastly's main training goal became learning to influence which moves Sleep Talk chose. He didn't expect perfect control at first, just the ability to confine Sleep Talk's selection to a limited subset of moves. The training routine was straightforward. Murkrow and Slowpoke would attack training targets in the room using hidden power, while also dodging whatever moves Ghastly emitted in its sleeping state. At first, Ghastly's Sleep Talk outputs were chaotic and unpredictable. As Aomu adjusted the conditions under which Ghastly fell asleep, its state, the environment, the timing, Ghastly began to narrow the range of moves Sleep Talk pulled from. Gradually, Aomu got it down to roughly 5 possible moves. That was a big step and validated his suspicion. With the right approach, Sleep Talk's choices could be influenced. Fully mastering Sleep Talk, however, proved difficult. Aomu tested several hypotheses about what determined the move used during Sleep Talk. First, he wondered if the dream scenario dictated the choice. That failed. Ghastly couldn't produce reliable, meaningful dreams quickly enough to influence the move. Next, he tried having Aomu issue commands near Ghastly while it fell asleep, thinking the trainer's voice might bias the selection. That also failed. He could reliably trigger Sleep Talk, but not control which move it picked. Finally, Aomu tried intense mental review before sleep, having Ghastly concentrate on certain moves. Concentration was hard and intrusive thoughts cropped up, but this time, the idea worked. When Ghastly focused on recalling hidden power before drifting off, the frequency with which Sleep Talk used hidden power rose significantly. Aomu was pleased. Although the method required discipline, at least there was a clear direction to pursue. He even considered other aids. What if Slowpoke reinforced Ghastly's concentration with telepathic support? That was another avenue worth exploring. Jingmu has been quite busy with work recently, so the writing may be a bit uneven. I hope everyone understands. Thank you to all the readers who have supported me so far, including Carrying a Snail Riding a Turtle, Ethan Z, You Have Courage Without Fear, Smoking a Cigarette Demeanor, Qingyang Kuang Lei, Ningyan Huang Liao, You Are a Little Water, Student Momozi, Floating Years Hua, Moam Skox MZCO, Ling Ren, Yingji Tian, Mo Yao Yang, Sui Feng Lu Ye. Book Friend 290416008565 Threng Mumu, Qishang Zhen. Mo's era is always too long. Wind, flowers, snow, moon, Holy Spirit, Tadim Paw J, Blank Despair, and everyone else who has shown support. Thank you. Also thanks to those who often recommend my work. I see and remember every name. Finally, thank you to readers who have added my stories to their collections. You are my greatest motivation. Chapter 71, Four Factions, 23. When Aoki reappeared in the central plaza of the base, only Murkrow accompanied him. Slowpoke had gone back into its Pokeball, and Ghastly had melted into Aoki's shadow. As the third test was about to begin, the plaza slowly filled, where it had been almost empty before. Aside from the large trial stone still standing on the central raised platform, a flat battleground now lay beside it, marked with lines. It looked like the arena where those defeated in the test would face off afterward. The ground had simply been cleared and leveled, but it was more than adequate for a fight. People drifted in until nearly every trial participant had formed a small faction. Aoki stood in the western corner. Not long after, Sky arrived with his group, and seeing Aoki, hurried over to fall in behind him. "Lord Aoki," they called, and with various respectful salutations, they formed one of the few organized blocks in the plaza. Aoki nodded once and closed his eyes, trying to rest. The plaza was clearly divided. Aoki's faction, over 20 strong, occupied the west. Guka's side, the largest, had about 40 people and stood across in the east. Jasmine, who had placed below Aoki and Guka in the last trial, gathered more than 20 mostly female followers in the north. Only a few boys stood among them and were routinely scolded. Nearly 30 others clustered in the south, a loose band of lone wolves who kept their distance from everyone and barely spoke, probably grouped together to avoid being bullied by the other three factions. Amid the scattered chatter, Viper arrived with his people. Shadow did not accompany him this time. Then, following an almost ritual procedure, the simplest and most direct test began, the attack power trial. To avoid the hesitation that had plagued the last test, Team Rocket decided to run the order strictly by registration numbers. With some numbers missing, the full 300 went by quickly. It let the organizers keep clear records of who had been eliminated and how strong the remaining contestants were. Murkrow sat obediently at Aoki's feet, preening lazily despite the greedy, jealous, and fearful looks drifting his way. He found the test dull. What was the point of pounding on a stubborn rock with everything you had? It only measured raw attack power, not overall fighting skill. Murkrow had sized up the competition. The foul-smelling snake with dead eyes across from him, a sleepy-looking, fat Crobat to the north, and a long-haired hound in the south. None of them were opponents he needed to fear. If the crowd's pressure hadn't been so intense, he would have urged Aoki not to bother with such a waste of time and to spend the hour training instead. Aoki, who knew Murkrow's temperament better than anyone, smiled and said, "Just hang on a little longer. After this test, we probably won't have to do such boring things. And who knows, you might get to fight a few times today." He shot a pointed look at Guka and his Arbok across the plaza. Guka caught the look and returned it with a slight, knowing curl of his lips before turning away in a small huff. Murkrow immediately perked up at Aoki's words and, following his gaze, stared intently at the Arbok. He wanted to take off, but checked himself halfway through a wing flap, mindful of the situation. Aoki noted other glances as well. Jasmine, the trainer of the large Crobat, and Alex, the strongest of the lone wolves in the south, kept stealing looks his way. Those looks carried many things: excitement, envy, hunger for a fight. Aoki smiled faintly, amusement in his eyes. "This is an interesting test," he murmured. "Viper's rule changes must mean something deeper. Right, Shadow?" Shadow hadn't appeared in the plaza, but Aoki had a strong sense that a skilled master was watching, perhaps the very reason the rules had been altered. If Aoki wanted to meet the requirement to leave the trial island, he knew he couldn't merely edge out others in attack power. He needed to crush them decisively in actual combat. Raw strength alone wouldn't prove he could dominate in a real fight. Or, as Shadow might have reasoned, this trial simply differed from previous ones. There was no point hiding anyone's talent. The best way to test fighters was through direct combat. In a life-or-death arena, where contestants faced peers of similar ability, no one would risk their life merely to conceal their true power. A few participants with sharp instincts or hidden backgrounds had also sensed the change and were focusing squarely on Aoki. That suited both Murkrow, hungry for battle, and Shadow's implied plan to probe Aoki's capabilities. Aoki, for his part, intended to use the coming fights to establish his sway over the others, to make them acknowledge his dominance. Interesting, he breathed, watching the plaza tighten around the impending test. Thank you all for your support. Thank you to the readers in the Book City for your donations. The arrangements went smoothly this time. At the proctor's call, everyone obediently filed up to the trial stone for testing. Having gone through 2 rounds already, the examinees had become adept at driving their attack values high. The displayed numbers showed a general improvement across the board. The gains weren't as dramatic as in the second round, but under the threat of death, the progress was still significant. Those at the bottom had trained desperately all week. They didn't want to finish last because last place meant death. Number 46, attack value 198. Next. Number 54, attack value 178. Next. Number 58, attack value. As the proctor read each number and attack value, some contestants smiled with satisfaction while others watched worryingly. No one despaired. There was still a challenge round, a last chance to climb the ranking. Each test sifted the group like sand, revealing whatever talent remained. Arbok, use bite. Bang! Number 99, attack value 337. Soon it was Gujia's turn. His Arbok hit an attack value of 337, the first person so far to break 300. Gasps ran through the crowd as Gujia led Arbok off the platform, proud. After Aoki had taken first place last time, Gujia had doubled down on training this week. Arbok was proud too, still smarting from being outshone by Murkrow the last time. With the training method Gujia had gotten from his brother, Arbok's improvement was considerable. Gujia returned to his spot, glanced at Aoki, and forced himself calm. He was arrogant, but not foolish. He knew the attack value test wasn't the main point. The real battle would be the challenges that followed. Good test numbers meant nothing if he couldn't win in actual combat. Aoki admitted that Gujia, with limited resources, had indeed pushed Arbok to near-optimal performance. If Aoki hadn't been reborn, Gujia might well have taken first place decisively. Gujia's result energized the crowd. Number 134, attack value 308, came the next call. Jasmine, her Pokemon a huge Golbat, had finally broken 300. Jasmine had placed third in the last test. Aoki had little memory of her from his past life, and even in Team Rocket, they had barely interacted. She remained mysterious. For a young woman to keep third place in the harsh Trial Island environment and to gather followers who could challenge Gujia spoke to a complicated background Aoki couldn't ignore. Number 156, attack value 330. The strongest of the lone wolves, Alec, had evolved his Poochyena into a Mightyena during the test and surged past Jasmine to sit directly behind Gujia. Ever since Shadow had remarked that the trial was unusual, Aoki had been noticing more and more oddities. An unusually high number of Pokemon with top aptitudes, some that would normally attract Team Rocket Squad or battalion leaders' attention, were freely in the hands of trial participants. Gujia's high-aptitude Arbok, Jasmine's giant Golbat, Alec's Mightyena, these were all exceptional. Even stranger, amid many Kanto species, a Hoenn Pokemon had appeared. The trial was beginning to feel conspiratorial. In his former life, when survival was the only concern, Aoki hadn't dwelled on such things. Now, in his second chance, irregularities flickered into view and made him uneasy. Number 234, prepare for testing. The proctor's voice cut through Aoki's thoughts. It was his turn. Under everyone's gaze, Aoki walked onto the stage with Murkrow. Those he had humiliated before no longer dared to mock him. Between his decisive defeat of Soros, his capture of Sky, and the gift of coughing, Aoki had established a ruthless, capable image among the contestants. Jasmine and Alec, who had been distracted off stage, both looked toward him now. An ordinary participant who had surpassed them had left a strong impression. Ignoring the stares, Aoki gave calm commands. Murkrow, Tailwind, boost speed, then wing attack. Murkrow rose from the platform and caught the tailwind. Its speed built steadily, and then it nosedived, a whistling streak across the sky. The spectators watched in stunned silence. This time, Aoki's technique wasn't coy or hidden. It was an obvious, all-out strike, a sharp contrast to his indifferent demeanor during earlier tests. Murkrow slammed into the trial stone, the flying energy on its wings condensing into a faint white glow as it struck. The impact landed with a dull, resonant thud that made the plaza seem to tremble. The trial stone was crafted to withstand enormous force by Team Rocket's standards, but for a moment, the onlookers felt as if it might crack. After the dust settled, the plaza fell completely silent. All eyes fixed on the pale characters that had begun to swirl and solidify on the dark surface of the trial stone. Attack value 458. Those monitoring the readout were speechless. Everyone had expected Aoki to challenge for first place again, but no one had foreseen a score like 458. He didn't just take first, he left Gujia in second by 121 points. That gap was staggering. Some people might never make up 100+ points with lower scores. The result was absolute dominance. Only one word could describe how Aoki now looked to the others. Terrifying. Jingmu just discovered that some readers sent him red envelopes for this book on the app. Thank you for your support. Chapter 73, Gujia Challenges Aoki, 1/3. This little brat. Viper, who sat in the stands, couldn't help but laugh as he muttered in surprise. I wonder what Shadow told him. He's not holding back at all this time. He peered again at the large white characters on the trial stone to make sure there was no mistake, then chuckled softly. As the Rocket team's chief instructor who had been stationed on Trial Island for years, he was the one who best understood the significance of Aomori's score. It wasn't an exaggeration to say Aomori's result was outstanding compared to all previous participants. Cough! Viper cleared his throat. The examiner on stage, jolted by the interruption, quickly announced, Number 234, cough! Attack value, 458. A collective gasp swept the square. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations. Below the trial platform, Jasmine's small mouth hung open. Her pretty face had gone a little stiff as she stared at Aomori and Murkrow on the stage. After a long moment, her chest rose and fell, and she whispered, Is this his real strength? The variable master mentioned? Guga opened his mouth to speak, but only managed a self-muted complaint. He beat me last time, and this time, he's miles ahead. What kind of monster is he? In a week, from an attack value a bit over 200 to over 400, he really is mysterious. This trial's getting more interesting, Alex said calmly from the crowd, though his trembling hand stroking Mightyena betrayed him. Is this the Master's true power? Soros didn't die in vain. Sky, Aomori's top subordinate, muttered as he stared incredulously at the numbers on the stone. He had expected, at best, that Aomori might squeak past Guga like last time. He hadn't imagined Aomori could be this overwhelming. Many people showed shocked expressions, and everyone stared at Aomori with unreadable thoughts. After the examiner recorded the score, Aomori led Murkrow off the platform and returned to his original spot. As their leader, he was soon surrounded by followers, and after that result, the circle tightened. They felt lucky to be attached to such a powerful trial participant. Following Aomori would mean fewer troubles on Trial Island and greater status in the Rocket team later on. No one else posted anything as astonishing. Aside from Sky, who surprised people slightly with a 288 attack value using the recently captured coughing, no other standout appearances occurred. That coughing, originally Soros's, achieving such a score with Sky hinted that Sky's skill as a trainer wasn't weak. Coughing wasn't the type to attack directly, yet it had improved after being newly tamed. Before long, everyone's basic tests were finished. The final rankings were somewhat surprising, but the top spots remained largely the same. Aomori once again took first place with an astonishing attack value of 458. The top ranks were second place, Guga Arbok, attack value 337. Third place, Alec Mightyena, attack value 330. Fourth place, Jasmine Zubat, attack value 308. Fifth place, Sky Kofing, attack value 288. Besides Sky replacing Soros in fifth and Alec moving up to third with his evolved Mightyena, the leading positions were unchanged. Still, after Shadow's warning, Aomori had noticed a few unusual participants further down the list, scores in the teens but with an odd feel, as if they were hiding something. Cough, cough. The examiner's cough on the platform drew everyone's attention back as he announced, "The basic test is complete. Under the new rules, anyone dissatisfied with their score may challenge a trial participant ranked up to 10 places above them. Each person gets one challenge. If the challenger wins, they take the loser's rank. If they lose, they drop 10 places. This challenge is a fight to the death. If the attack value test measured raw combat power, this open combat was meant to test control, command, and the practical results of training. After all, a Pokemon's fighting ability isn't determined by numbers alone. And because the challenge was a death match, every challenger was effectively an enemy to the end. Failure could mean death. The crowd stirred, then fell silent. Some participants glanced at one another, hesitant. Though many had been unhappy with their scores, especially those whose Pokemon weren't suited to direct attacks, the life-or-death stakes intimidated most. Those who'd hoped to challenge before now dared not step forward. The square felt heavy with a repressive atmosphere. The prospect of a deadly duel weighed on everyone. Aomori stood beside the platform, eyes casually sweeping the participants before settling on Guga with a faint smile. Guga was already looking at Aomori. He had made his decision, though Aomori's huge score had given him pause. When Aomori's gaze landed on him, it steadied him. "Humph, a bunch of trash. I'll go first. I challenge. First place, Aomori." Guga clenched his fist, looked up at the examiner, and declared his challenge. Chapter 74, Challenge 1. "I challenge. Number 1 Aomori," Gugia declared. With that decision made, he strode without hesitation toward the challenge ring, Arbok gliding at his side. All eyes snapped to him as he moved. The scrutiny only bolstered his confidence. His expression grew more determined and arrogant. The Rocket Team examiner frowned and looked up into the stands at Viper. Gugia's identity was no secret at the base now. If anything went wrong for him, not only Viper, but the examiner himself would have a hard time facing Gugia's brother's wrath. He had to wait for Viper's call. Viper's face was grave. He understood why Gugia had stepped up. With advantages of timing, location, and connections, yet finding himself increasingly outpaced by Aomori, his pride wouldn't let him remain quietly overshadowed. He nodded once, signaling the examiner that the challenge could go ahead. The examiner released a heavy sigh. If he had his choice, he wouldn't have been involved in this at all. This was the last matchup he wanted to referee, but as an official, he had no choice now. From his position by the ring, Gugia called out and laughed. "Aomori, what are you waiting for? Show me how strong you really are. Don't tell me it's all show." Aomori craned his neck lazily and smiled. Gugia's provocation was exactly what he expected. He'd kept his attention on Gugia partly to tease him and to give him the push to issue a challenge. If the match went well, Aomori would temporarily leave the island, and as the new leader of his faction, he wanted to make an impression. The examiner took the referee's stance and announced, "Number 234, Aomori. Number 99, Gugia, has challenged you. Do you accept?" A challenge could be accepted or forfeited. A forfeit meant an automatic loss, and your ranking would be taken by the challenger with a 10-place drop. Aomori's smile widened. Murkrow by his side fixed its gaze on its trainer. As Aomori's partner, it had long been irritated by Gugia's arrogance and had wanted a chance to fight Arbok. "Accept," Aomori said quietly, and walked to the other side of the ring under everyone's stares. The examiner muttered to himself. Of all the people to see facing off, it was these two. He knew Gugia's background, and Viper had briefly mentioned previous incidents on Shadow's side involving Aomori. This was someone that adult favored. Compared to that patron, Gugia's brother was practically a joke. "This match is a death match," the examiner declared. "Each trainer is limited to one Pokemon. There are no other rules. The match ends when one side surrenders or one Pokemon faints. Now, begin." The first challenge of the test was underway. Tension immediately flooded the venue. "Arbok, glare!" Gugia commanded first. Arbok reared, displaying the hypnotic patterns on its belly. With its Intimidate ability supporting it, the glare hit with full effect. "Murkrow, take to the air and use Tailwind. Don't look him in the eye," Aomori called. Murkrow launched into the air with a sharp caw. A faint white airflow surrounded it, giving it near frictionless motion as it streaked above the plaza like a dark comet. "Screech, Arbok!" Gugia countered. The two Pokemon became two sources of sound, one sweeping the ground and one from the sky. Invisible sound waves rippled across the crowd and the ring. Arbok, grounded and unable to fly, was at a clear disadvantage against the airborne Murkrow. Screech would lower defenses, but the battle's momentum remained firmly in Aomori's hands. "Aomori, you're not going to keep it in the air forever, are you?" Don't think you can dodge like that, Gujia snapped, frustrated at Murkrow's altitude. Aomori curled a lip in disdain. Idiot, crude provocation, he muttered, then issued his command. Murkrow, close in, wing attack! The spectators exchanged baffled looks. Convincing, it was obvious Aomori intended to strike, which incidentally played into Gujia's plan. Smiling darkly despite Aomori's insult, Gujia saw his opening. As long as Murkrow came close, Arbok could attack. Arbok, don't dodge. Use bind, then bite. Arbok's body was all muscle, its fangs deadly. Bind and bite would let it make the most of those strengths. Murkrow, a black streak with flecks of white on its wings, dove in without hesitation. The collision came with a thunderous impact. Murkrow's wing, charged with flying-type force, slammed into Arbok and raised a dust cloud. Arbok cried out as the blow landed. Though it had braced for an attack and had hoped to set up a counter, the hit was stronger than expected, leaving it momentarily staggered. Murkrow, obeying Aomori, pulled back without a second strike. Arbok's bind and bite connected with air. Gujia's face drained. Quick, acid! Arbok recovered in time. A purple liquid spat from its mouth and struck the retreating Murkrow at high speed. Sizzle, acid hissed on contact, eating into Murkrow's feathers and reducing its defense to some extent. After that first exchange, the two Pokémon separated, each planting itself at opposing ends of the ring and sizing the other up. One clash had already revealed a lot about each fighter's capabilities. Both Pokémon glowed with battle intent. Both were fighters through and through. Please collect and recommend. You are my greatest motivation. Chapter 75, Challenge 2, 3 Thirst. Guga gritted his teeth as he stared at Aoki standing calmly at the far end of the plaza. Frustration showed on his face. Arbok was at a serious disadvantage against the nimble Murkrow, and Murkrow's frighteningly high attack power made Guga unsure whether Arbok could hold out in a straight exchange. Arbok panted heavily. Murkrow's earlier blows had clearly left him off balance. Murkrow, meanwhile, hovered in the air, battle spirit plain to see. The acid he'd taken was little more than a scratch to a bird used to fighting in the wild. The gap in power between the two Pokémon was obvious. Guga, give it up. You can't beat me, Aoki said coolly, watching Guga's ashen face. Frankly, Aoki would have preferred to avoid crushing Guga. Guga's brother was a Rocket Team captain. That made Aoki cautious. But he also knew that if this fight dragged on, he couldn't guarantee restraint. This was a fight to the finish, and Aoki was not going to hold back. If Arbok died, the enmity with Guga would be complete. Since they had become enemies, even a captain brother wouldn't stop Aoki from ending the threat. With his years of experience and the aid of his battle chip, Aoki believed he could surpass that unknown captain and close the grudge for good. He only needed time to grow stronger. Aoki's words sounded like mercy to the crowd. But to Guga, they were an unbearable insult. Pride flared within him. As if making up his mind, Guga waved a hand over his Rocket Team belt and produced a dark purple orb. Aoki's face tightened on seeing the move. An ugly premonition prickled at him. Guga's jaw clenched until it creaked. You forced my hand. Prepare to die, he hissed. He tossed the purple orb to Arbok, who, understanding instantly, swallowed it whole. On the spectator stand, Doozer narrowed his eyes at the sight, but said nothing. With his status, he recognized the item at once. It was on the Rocket Team's exchange list, clearly described and worth 5,000 points. The pill massively boosted a poison-type Pokémon's internal poison energy, multiplying it 5-fold, but came with a steep cost. The Pokémon would be debilitated and weak for the following week. Guga had kept the pill as an emergency last resort, given to him by his brother before the trip to the island. He hadn't expected to be forced into using it so soon, but he was determined. If he could finish Aoki here, no one would be able to suppress him in this trial. A week of weakness afterward was a price he was sure he could pay. He swallowed his fear and pushed the gamble. Chaba! Arbok cried as the pill took effect. A rush of power surged through his body, pushing him beyond his limits. He swelled slightly as a faint purple mist seeped from him, curling around his form. Hiss! Hiss! The mist touched the ground, etching little pits into the earth. All of it happened in an instant. Aoki hadn't been ready. Arbok, poison sting! Guga snarled. Dozens of purple barbs shot from Arbok's mouth, laced with concentrated poison and flying with unnaturally increased speed right at Murkrow. Murkrow, Gust, blow those poison stings away, Aoki barked, guessing from the purple haze and the lethal-looking barbs that Guga had used a poison enhancer. Murkrow whipped up a small whirlwind of flying energy with his wings, fanning it toward the oncoming needles. But the plan failed to unfold as Aoki expected. The poison stings, charged with intense poison energy, passed through the white vortex as if it were nothing more than a breeze. Their purple glow dimmed only slightly. In a heartbeat, the needles struck Murkrow, and a sickly purple sheen bloomed across his dark feathers. He'd been poisoned. Such strong poison energy. Aoki's frown deepened. He hadn't anticipated that trick. Guga must have powerful backing after all. Guga laughed wildly. Ha! Now what? Murkrow's poisoned. Finish him off quickly. Aoki, he thought, you can't just wear me down and kite now. Aoki didn't hesitate. Murkrow, keep Tailwind up, and then wing attack. Finish this quickly. The poisoned Murkrow stiffened but obeyed. He turned into a streak of black and struck, wing attack cleaving the air, a heavy, reliable assault ideal for a quick kill. Caw! Arbok, Scary Face, then Poison Fang. Guga ordered without concealing his intent to kill. Arbok's Scary Face twisted Murkrow's features. The bird's speed dropped noticeably. Murkrow still tried to lash out with his wings, but the poison's onset now mixed with the speed reduction. As he struck, Arbok's fangs, dripping with amplified poison energy, clamped down on Murkrow's wing. Chaba! Caw! They pulled apart, but the results had changed. Arbok took damage as before, but Murkrow had been bitten. The purple stain on his body deepened. He was not just poisoned, he was doubly afflicted. The momentum of the fight swung toward Guga. The situation was growing dire for Aoki and his Murkrow. Guga's grin widened. Ha! Today I'm going to watch you die! With Poison Fang doing extra work, Guga's confidence soared. Even if Arbok would be weakened for a week afterward, he believed it didn't matter. Who among those present would dare challenge him then? What he didn't expect, however, was that Aoki, at this very moment, smiled. Chapter 76, Challenges 3. Guga froze when he saw Aomori smile. He couldn't believe Aomori could grin in a situation like this. The crowd in the arena tittered and grew restless. Why would someone who'd been losing start smiling now? Aomori reached into his Team Rocket belt and produced a small remote and a pale yellow pill. All eyes dropped to the pill first. It looked like an ordinary antidote, one you could buy from Team Rocket's exchange list for 10 points. Useful, yes, but hardly enough to counter the powerful poison Arbok had inflicted on Murkrow. Ha! Aomori, you've got to be kidding. You think that trashy antidote can beat Arbok's venom? Guga burst out laughing. He'd expected Aomori to have an ace up his sleeve. Instead, it seemed to be nothing. Aomori only smiled wider. Ready, Murkrow? He asked. Murkrow answered with an excited cry. Someone in the crowd inhaled sharply and pointed at the remote. Look at the remote. That's a custom weight-release remote from Team Rocket. Recognition spread through the arena. Murkrow had been carrying weights this whole time? The bird that had struck so hard before had been held back? Everyone's minds filled with questions and disbelief. Aomori ignored the gasps. He flicked the remote with one slender finger and tossed the antidote with the other. Murkrow cried out and lunged as the antidote flashed and was swallowed in a single gulp. The poison wasn't gone, but it was suppressed enough to ease some of the symptoms. At the same instant, the remote's signal released the hidden weights. The change was immediate. Murkrow felt lighter, faster, breath came easier. Guga scowled and barked commands. Arbok, Poison Sting. Arbok's venomous barbs hissed forward, but Murkrow darted aside and charged, wings slicing. Murkrow, dodge, close in and wing attack. With the weights gone, Murkrow's speed made all the difference. Remote attacks like Poison Sting couldn't track it. Guga countered, unperturbed. Arbok, Scary Face, then Poison Fang. Arbok's Scary Face snapped at Murkrow, trying to shave off its speed, but Murkrow slammed into Arbok with a flurry of wing attacks. The purple pill coursing through Arbok's veins dulled some of the pain from those blows, but the assaults kept coming. As Arbok lunged with Poison Fang, Murkrow accelerated again, and at the crucial moment, Aomori's voice cut cold through the air. Protect! A shimmering green shield sprang up around Murkrow, and Arbok's fangs bit only empty air. The move Aomori had taught Murkrow, the life-saving Protect, held. Murkrow's wings became blades and struck with full force. Arbok was hit so hard it was sent flying, skidding against the arena wall and landing in a corner, utterly defeated. The crowd fell silent, stunned. The tide had turned so fast no one had expected it. Guga stared in disbelief. Aomori looked calm as ever. Then, cool and emotionless, he gave the final order. Murkrow, finish him. A chill ran through the spectators. Guga's status in Team Rocket made the call to execute him dangerous. Many shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Aomori and the fallen Arbok. Guga's face went white. He broke into a run toward the arena, shouting, "Stop!" The Trial Island examiner on duty raised his voice too. "Stop, now!" Aomori didn't immediately heed them. Only one voice carried weight enough to make him obey. Instructor Viper, the island's senior authority, stepped forward and commanded, "Aomori, stop!" There was something in Viper's tone that Aomori couldn't ignore. Reluctantly, Murkrow pulled up. Viper's intervention saved Guga from death. He had to. Publicly letting a Team Rocket captain be killed in a trial would have consequences. Still, Viper's voice held no leniency. Guga might avoid dying, but he would not escape punishment. Aomori let Murkrow stand down, expression unreadable. The crowd buzzed with a new electricity, respect for Aomori's restraint, fear of his resolve, and a dawning unease about what would come next for Guga. Please recommend and bookmark. Special thanks to Carrying a Snail Riding a Turtle and Book City People as before for the 100-point rewards. Chapter 77, Blinding His Eye, 23. Blind his eye! Murkrow, which had just paused, lunged even faster this time. Before Guga could reach them, it viciously pecked at Arbok's eye. When it took to the air again, a bloody eyeball hung in its beak. "Arbok!" Guga shouted, his run faltering. Murkrow didn't hesitate. It swallowed the eyeball whole. No one in the arena dared to speak. Viper, who had instituted the deathmatch rule, gave a tacit approval of Aoki's action, even though Aoki had pushed beyond that rule. Aoki met Viper's gaze without flinching, his expression questioning and severe. He didn't believe Aoki had acted out of favor for Gujia's brother. Even if Gugia were a Rocket Team captain, that was a middle-tier position, vastly lower than high-ranking members like Viper. Viper's face turned grave as Aoki stared him down. He rubbed his brow, not angry because of the look, but because there were reasons he couldn't voice. Then Viper said, "Finally, he's still useful." The words carried an unmistakable finality. As the Rocket Team's chief instructor, Viper offered that explanation partly out of respect for his friend Ying. Otherwise, anyone who met Aoki's gaze like that might already be dead a dozen times over. Aoki knew when to stop. Even without a full explanation, there was nothing to be gained by arguing. He understood what Viper meant. This trial was different. Murkrow returned to Aoki's side, restless and somewhat reluctant. Being stopped just as it could finish the job left it unsatisfied, but tearing out that hateful snake's eye had been a grim relief. Aoki stroked its feathers and then reached into his belt for a string of antidotes, feeding them to the bird one by one. After the purple pill Arbok had taken, its venomous potency had increased dramatically. Murkrow didn't excrete all the poison until after its fifth antidote. Gugia stumbled to Arbok's side, desperate, pulling out bottles and vials as if they were free and pouring them into the snake's mouth while spraying healing salves on the wound to staunch the bleeding. The sting of the disinfectant made the unconscious Arbok writhe. An ordinary Pokemon might recover quickly with prompt treatment, but Arbok was not ordinary now. The purple pill had dulled its awareness. The loss of its fighting ability was a kind of protective shutdown. Worse, the pill's side effects could cause a drop in level or even reduce its aptitude if it didn't recover in time, rendering it unable to keep pace with Aoki in future fights. Aoki's final command to blind one of Arbok's eyes had almost cut its combat capability by 20%. For a moment, Aoki considered finishing them both, but he let the thought go. Gugia had openly vowed to kill him. Aoki had been ready for the same. They were mortal enemies. Still, Aoki didn't hold petty grudges. He cleared threats when necessary. He already held the advantage. The gap between them would only widen. Besides, that purple pill was not something any opponent could casually afford to take. Gugia was applying medicine as if performing a rescue, frantically trying to undo the damage. Under the stunned eyes of everyone in the square, Aoki led Murkrow away from the arena. The examination official called out, "Challenge ended. Challenger failed. Rank drops 10 places. Gujia, barely getting Arbok's injuries under control, put the snake back into its Pokeball in silence. He lowered his head and left the arena, heading straight for the living quarters. He had been dealt a heavy blow. If Viper had not intervened, he probably would have died. It was a harsh lesson. There was always someone stronger. Sky watched Aoki approach, the last flutter of hope dying in him. When Aoki had claimed the top spot with 458 attack points earlier, Sky had been surprised, but he hadn't realized that Murkrow hadn't even been pushed to its full strength. Only when Gujia had thrown everything in did Murkrow unleash its true speed and power and crush Gujia's effort. Sky also knew Aoki's roster wasn't limited to that one Murkrow. He had a powerful Slowpoke as well. Thinking of Murkrow's ferocity and Aoki's overall ability, Sky had no more illusions. Pledging full allegiance to Aoki no longer seemed like a betrayal of principle, but a pragmatic choice. The last command, order Murkrow to blind Arbok, sealed Sky's submission. Barring accidents, he would never again entertain thoughts of betrayal. He had been impressed by Aoki's strength and methods. "Lord Aoki, do you need healing potions? We still have some in stock," Sky asked, stepping forward. His manner was more open now, and his respect seemed sincere. Aoki shook his head in mild surprise and declined. Murkrow, once cleansed of the toxins, was in decent condition. There was no need to waste potions. The 20 or so people behind Sky wore excited expressions. Having such a powerful leader was a fortune. After the Aoki-Gujia match concluded, other challengers began stepping up. But after the two shocking battles, most of the following matches felt like skirmishes. Though they were billed as death matches, few truly meant to kill, except those with deep blood feuds. Most challengers surrendered once they saw they were outmatched. Losing a fight simply meant dropping 10 places, while stubbornly stalling could lead to uncontrollable outcomes. Only the top 10 earned prizes. Lower rankings held little significance. There was one exception, the fight for last place. That was the most tragic and ruthless struggle of the test. Everyone knew that finishing last meant direct elimination, and elimination meant death. With no future to lose, those trapped at the bottom threw everything into their challenges and fought to the death. After the first contestant in last place successfully challenged, a frantic sequence of fights for that spot began, and casualties rose. The examination ran until evening and ended amid a chorus of gasps and whispers. 5 people had died outright in the day's challenges. 3 more survived, but their Pokemon could not be saved in time and later perished. In those cases, the trainers would not die immediately, but their fates were sealed for the next test. Viper's new rule had pushed this trial into bloodier territory. Please recommend, please collect. A massive cargo ship cut across the endless ocean, thick white smoke belching from its tall funnel like a single plume rising from a desert. At the very bow stood a young man in black, hands on the rail, body leaning slightly forward. His dark hair, a little tousled, whipped in the sea breeze, and the humid air felt fresh against his skin. Perched on the rail beside him was a pitch-black, bird-like Pokemon, Murkrow, its sharp eyes fixed on the horizon. The young man and the Murkrow were Aoki and his Pokemon. After the last trial, Aoki's performance had satisfied Shadow, and, as promised, Shadow had allowed him to leave Trial Island earlier than planned. This cargo ship was one of Team Rocket's supply vessels that serviced Trial Island monthly, and with Shadow's permission, Aoki had boarded the return run. Unlike the one time he'd left Trial Island in his previous life, this cruise let him clearly see the return route. He realized Trial Island sat at the junction of the Kanto and Johto sea areas. How's it feel? Even though it's been less than a month, doesn't it seem like you've been away from civilization forever? A slightly hoarse voice called from behind them. Shadow stepped out from the ship's cabin and came to stand beside Aoki, leaning on the rail the same way. Aoki greeted him respectfully. Shadow waved it away. Formality wasn't his concern. Though he held a high rank within Team Rocket, he cared little for ceremony. Strength was what mattered to him. Those who had it enjoyed privileges. Aoki didn't yet have great strength, but his potential had caught Shadow's eye, and for other reasons, Shadow treated him without pretension. "It doesn't feel that different," Aoki said evenly. "I was an orphan before. Surviving out in the world wasn't much different from surviving on Trial Island. The weak get trampled, race. Everything I do is just to stay alive. Shadow froze for a moment, then laughed. True, surprised laughter. We're not so different, eh? His eyes drifted for a second, as if tracing some distant memory. Silence fell between them, filled only by the wind and waves. After a beat, Shadow gave a self-mocking chuckle. When you've been through a lot, you end up looking back. Aoki smiled faintly and said nothing more. To an outsider, Shadow might seem a cold, efficient killer, the mysterious vice leader of Team Rocket's Shadow Division. But after a few interactions, Aoki had found him surprisingly easy to get along with. When he relaxed his aura, he could be almost neighborly, like an uncle. Shadow produced a League identification card embossed with a League emblem and an unfamiliar portrait, handing it to Aoki. I had someone make this for you. All the background checks and details have been handled, so unless a League official at the Elite 4 level inspects it personally, it'll pass. Aoki's heart gave a small jump. A League ID forged by Shadow himself. If it worked, it would mean a legitimate identity, a life in the open. Shadow then pulled out a mask as thin as a cicada's wing and tossed it to him. This is a lifelike skin mask made by our so-called experts. Unless it's deliberately ripped or burned, no one can tell it's fake. It matches the face on your League ID. With that ID and the realistic mask, even someone who knew Aoki might not recognize him in person, so long as his Pokémon didn't give him away. When Shadow handed over the ID and mask, Aoki had already planned for that. His Pokémon would be linked to his two identities. Murkrow would be the Pokémon he used within Team Rocket. Another Pokémon, Slowpoke, he decided, would serve as the companion for his League identity. It would be more complicated, but if he could keep the identities separate, he might one day infiltrate the League itself and rise to Elite Four status, perhaps matching Koga. It wasn't impossible. Rising through both Team Rocket and the League, leveraging resources from both, could accelerate his power. Shadow's careful preparations seemed aimed precisely at that possibility. We'll be docking in half an hour. Vermilion City, Shadow said. You can get off there, he added. Take that ID and go to the Team Rocket outpost at Lake of Rage in Mahogany Town, Johto. Bring back whatever you're told to fetch. Someone will be in touch. Shadow sighed, stretched, and walked back into the cabin. Aoki stood on the deck watching him go, the League card and mask in his hand, his eyes bright. No wonder Trial Island had never been discovered by the League. The Rocket team had allies in key places. Vermilion City, home of Litlam. Surge's gym was one of those anchors. The city's gym leaders, Leonard Surge, Sabrina, and Koga, were the three senior cadres that Giovanni had driven into the League's structure. Koga, based in Fuchsia City, was the most formidable of the three. When the Indigo League's territory had been divided into Kanto and Johto, Koga had risen to become the Johto region's Poison-type Elite Four, a prime internal asset for Giovanni. Surge of Vermilion and Sabrina of Saffron were not weaker by much. Sabrina, the so-called Psychic Queen, against whom poison types are at a disadvantage, might even outmatch Koga in a straight-up 6-on-6 clash. Koga's true strength lay in stealth, sneak attacks and assassination, the tactics of a ninja, so in a head-to-head battle with a Psychic of Elite Four caliber, there were limits to what he could do. Leech Surge's greatest talent, by contrast, was in commanding troops. He was the one among them most skilled at organizing large-scale, military-style engagements, like a general leading an army. Each of the three had their own specialty, and together they formed three of Team Rocket's deepest anchors within the League. Aoki tucked the ID and mask away and turned his gaze back to the approaching coast, the outlines of Vermilion City growing clearer on the horizon. Chapter 79, Vermilion City 13. To most arrivals, Vermilion City would seem unusually peaceful. It's where many Pokémon organizations cluster, so it's hard to imagine it as one of Team Rocket's major strongholds in Kanto. That quiet was precisely because Ultra Surge operated here. Team Rocket members dared not make trouble. So although the organization's influence was significant, the city itself remained surprisingly calm. Aoki, a former Team Rocket member in his previous life, had been to Vermilion many times and knew the place well. As long as you didn't go looking for trouble, nothing unexpected would happen. The assignment Shadow had given him, however, travel to Mahogany Town in Johto, was far more complicated. Mahogany's gym leader, Price, nicknamed the Winter's Ice Willow, was an Elite Four level trainer whose power outstripped most normal Elite Four members. His Ice-type Pokemon were terrifyingly strong. Were it not for his personality, Price could easily be in the Alliance's Elite Four, or even contend for champion. Price wouldn't notice someone as small as Aoki, but his presence in Mahogany showed how highly the Alliance valued the city. That made Aoki's mission unpredictable and risky. Half an hour later, the ship reached Vermilion's port. Among the freighters and passenger liners, the cargo ship that had come from Trial Island blended in seamlessly. A young man stepped down the gangplank, ordinary-looking, in a plain trainer's outfit, accompanied by a light pink slowpoke. Aoki had changed his appearance completely. After putting on a lifelike human mask and switching into an Alliance trainer's uniform, the aloof demeanor he'd shown on Trial Island was gone. He breathed in the salt air and felt solid ground beneath his feet. He'd finally arrived in Vermilion City. Vermilion sits on Kanto's southern coast. As Kanto's largest port city, its development revolves around maritime trade. The docks aren't just for cargo. Vermilion Port is the region's biggest harbor and hosts huge ships like the SS Anne, the SS Aqua, and the SS Cinnabar. The city isn't the wealthiest in Kanto, but it's second only to Saffron. Port taxes have driven rapid growth. Team Rocket, entrenched here, also profited handsomely. Lelt Surge's presence made sense. When Aoki stepped out of the port, the sun was already low. People moved about busily, but contentment showed on many faces. The pleasant pace of life in Vermilion made its residents happy. Because it's a port city, a stranger like Aoki didn't draw notice. Countless people arrived every day, and that suited him fine. He didn't want to be stared at. Although emerging from Trial Island left him with a faint, wild aura, Aoki's prior life taught him how to hide it. Most people took him for a trainer who'd spent a long time surviving in the wild, and that commanded a certain respect. The Pokeballs at his waist and the Slowpoke at his side also identified him as a trainer, so no one caused trouble. There was one problem: he was broke. Aoki felt the truth of the saying that a single penny can stump a hero. His first priority was to earn money. Following signs, he found a Pokemon item shop and sold less important goods to raise funds. He couldn't part with truly valuable items, so he only managed to exchange them for 5,000 Alliance coins. The Alliance ID card Shadow had given him proved indispensable. It doubled as a bank card, and he transferred the money into the account. Finally, his balance went from 0 to 5,000 Alliance coins. With cash in hand, Aoki left the shop and headed for the Pokemon Center. Vermilion Center sits in the city's heart and serves as a hospital for injured Pokemon. It covers an area almost the size of 2 football fields and stood 5 or 6 stories tall. In Alliance trainer clothes, Aoki didn't draw attention from security. He showed his Alliance ID and walked in. In his previous life, Aoki had rarely used Pokemon centers. When he was weak and unregistered, he couldn't enter such tightly controlled places. Once he'd grown strong, he no longer needed them. This was his first visit since reincarnation, but he knew the basics of what to expect. The center was staffed by Nurse Joy and many medical aides and had healing Pokemon like Chansey. Trainers came here constantly, so the staff were busy but efficient. It was one of the Alliance's most important facilities and operated in a very orderly way. Trainers queued for their numbers unless an emergency arose. The center also provided lodging, and Aoki planned to stay the night. More importantly, he wanted a full medical check of his Pokemon to rule out hidden injuries. From his experience as a breeder, Aoki knew how dangerous latent wounds could be. Small, unnoticed problems can accumulate into chronic conditions that sap a Pokemon's fighting ability, reduce its potential, or even cause death. The scanning chip he carried had shown nothing unusual, but the chip's database on hidden injuries wasn't comprehensive. The safest course was to use Alliance medical technology for a thorough examination. This week, we're getting strong recommendations. Please support by adding collections and recommendations. Thank you all for your support. Special thanks to Ice Seal Sai for the 200 tip, Bookfriend 290411924230 for 100, Moam Cox MZCO for 100, and Bookfriend 2904600850653 for 100. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 80, Pokemon Center, 23. Team Rocket had plenty of scientists, and some of their technology even outstripped the Alliance's, but when it came to medical care, the Alliance was far ahead. The Pokemon Center, home to the world's most advanced medical facilities, was one of the Alliance's most important institutions. Without its support, the Alliance's trainers would be far less formidable. In short, the Pokemon Center played a critical role in maintaining the Alliance's strength. There weren't many people getting checkups that evening, so Aomu didn't have to wait long after taking a number. When his number was called, he stepped up to the counter and was greeted by a staff member whose practiced smile belonged to someone used to this work. He set his Alliance ID card and 3 Pokeballs on the counter. He had already returned Slowpoke and Ghastly to their Pokeballs before entering the center, so all 3 Pokemon would be included in the examination. Although he preferred to keep the existence of Murkrow and Ghastly quiet, as an unknown trainer here, he didn't expect anyone to pay his Pokemon any special mind. He wasn't worried about his identity being exposed. This will be a full-body exam for 3 Pokemon. The total is 3,000 Alliance dollars. Would you like to pay cash or charge it to your account on your ID? The attendant asked, already inserting his card into the terminal. Charge it to my account, please, Aomu replied with a light smile. Also, can I register for a room? I'd like to stay one night. The attendant's smile didn't falter. Yes, one night's accommodation is 500 Alliance dollars. Would you like me to apply that to your account now? Yes, please, and please take care of my Pokemon. Of course, our exams are very thorough. Here's your room key and your number tag. The exam will take a little while. You can wait in the reception area or in your room. We'll notify you as soon as it's finished. She clicked a few keys and confirmed the deductions. After returning his ID card, room key, and number tag, she added, "If you need anything while you wait, just let us know." The Alliance really did think of everything. A comprehensive exam costing 1,000 Alliance dollars per Pokemon was expensive but reasonable for the level of care. After the $500 room fee, Aomu still had 1,500 Alliance dollars left on his card. For Aomu, who'd seen more of the world than most, that wasn't a fortune, but for ordinary people, it was significant. In the Pokemon world, a typical office worker earned between 10,000 and 20,000 Alliance dollars a month, so being a trainer could be a costly profession. That reality explained why organizations like Team Rocket appealed to many commoners. They provided a path into training that many families couldn't otherwise afford. Aomu and his group were exceptions, chosen and groomed, but for most, joining Team Rocket was a comparatively easier way in, even if getting out was hard. Rather than head straight to his room or sit in the reception area, Aomu spent a while exploring the center. The Pokemon Center in Vermilion City had 6 floors. The first floor handled routine treatments and basic exams. The second floor covered serious injuries and patient rooms. The third housed a large dining hall with sections for humans and for Pokemon. The fourth and fifth were entirely accommodation floors, and the sixth was reserved for high-ranking Alliance personnel, off-limits without authorization. Behind the building was a wide open training area and several well-equipped battlefields where trainers could practice. The layout was practical and complete. His tour took about half an hour. When he returned to the reception area a little later, the staff notified him that the exams were finished. All 3 Pokemon showed no abnormalities and were developing exceptionally well. The staff even praised them. Aomu only smiled briefly, then released Slowpoke and headed to the dining hall on the 3rd floor. It was getting late, dinner time. "Slowpoke, I'll take you to try Alliance food. It's different from roasted meat and fish, but it's worth tasting," Aomu said, rubbing the Slowpoke's head. "Yaran." Slowpoke, the biggest eater among Aomu's team, brightened immediately at the mention of food. Its eyes lit up and it gave a cheerful cry, clearly excited. The dining hall had filled for the evening. People queued at the counters, some accompanied by their Pokemon, others chatting with friends. Slowpoke walked beside Aomu, no longer being levitated by Psychic. It had practiced enough to keep pace on its own. Their entrance, however, drew attention. In the relatively quiet hall, the whispers were easy to hear. Why is that Slowpoke's color off? Are you idiots? That's a shiny Slowpoke. Its color is just lighter. Lucky trainer? That Slowpoke moves pretty fast. That trainer looks new, not from around here, right? Aomu heard the murmurs and frowned. Slowpoke's unusual coloration would naturally attract attention, but he disliked the feeling of being put on display, of his Pokémon becoming a spectacle for other people's entertainment. He tightened his grip on Slowpoke's leash and moved deeper into the hall, searching for somewhere they could eat without so many prying eyes.